Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Yo, what's happening, Rush Nation? Don't know if I'm live yet. I might be, I might not. We're on the YouTubes, we're on Periscope. It's me and the big man. It's Tuesday. There's probably 3 man and a dog watching. We welcome you all in. I've got a Steelers hat because for the first time in history, the Steelers are 10-0. Big man, how you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm all good. So you're wearing a Steelers hat because for the first time in their history, they're 10-0.
Yeah, and spoiler, it was the first one that came out the wardrobe. So
That's a better. That's what I would have led with, because I was saying this to Stuart Love yesterday because he's a big Steelers fan. Like,
oh no,
and I know we've got writers on the staff who are Steelers fans, and before they all decide to get their knives and do some nasty things to me, I want to say that their schedule is probably the easiest in the NFL.
oh yeah, it's been an absolute cakewalk.
I mean, they've had 7 teams that have combined for 16 wins this season.
Yeah,
Maybe 17 if you include. Yeah, no, it's 16 still. So yeah, so all in all, they have had a schedule that I'm not saying the Steelers aren't good, and I'm not saying that the Steelers are worthy of where they are. But just because they're 10-0, do not make them Super Bowl favorites. That's the only caution I'm throwing out there right now, because right now I don't think that they're going to go to the Super Bowl.
And for those of you joining us on the podcast, you missed the beginning of this conversation because it was on YouTube exclusive. So we were just talking about the Steelers being 10-0 while I'm wearing this hat, and Murf doesn't think they are going to the Super Bowl. Yeah, there's going to be people out there who are mighty upset with that take, mate.
And that's fine, and I understand that it's a take that I just think that the odds go against them. You're talking about the fact that they won't have had a bye since week 4. Okay, they might get the bye at the start of the playoffs. That will probably help them a little bit. But in order to be ready for the playoffs, you have to have played some teams that have got you match ready. And in all seriousness, the 3 teams that they've played that are worth even mentioning in the conversation are the Titans, the Ravens, and the Browns. They're the only 3, right? Browns don't have a quarterback. Just don't really have a quarterback. They have a guy who plays the position, but I'm not convinced that he's actually a quarterback, as opposed to just somebody who's just there to, I don't know, conduct or whatever it is that Baker Mayfield does. 3 games in a row now without a touchdown pass. So
Cam.
Yeah, yeah. But he doesn't do it with his legs either. That's the difference. At least Cam does it with his legs.
True that.
And then you've got the Titans, who are the Titans, and listen, great win yesterday, and the Ravens. So I'm not taking away what the Steelers have done, and you can only beat what's in front of you. But when you have had 7 teams play for a combined 16 wins, you're basically, and they've played the NFC East. Let's get it right now that they haven't had the toughest of tests. And when that happens, when you end up facing a big game, a big test, that first one is the hardest. And so if they don't get these competitive games until the postseason, they still got a game against Jacksonville. They still have another game against Jacksonville, against Baltimore. They still have another game against Cleveland. So, they still have a couple of competitive games, but, they've still got to play Cincinnati without Burrow. And, it's a tough one, I think. Whereas you look at games like last night, the Mahomes is playing those games that are difficult, against, the Raiders gave him a great run for money, that clutch touchdown drive at the end of the game to win the games. Those are the things that get you ready for the playoffs, dealing with adversity, dealing with difficult times, difficult schedules, because that's what brings your squad together. The Steelers right now, and listen, they're saying all the right things in the press. We don't care about 16-0. We don't care about undefeated. We're here for the Lombardi. Great. And that's a very easy thing to say when you're 10-0. But actually, what happens when you get a loss? How do you deal with that adversity? This locker room does not know. You've got guys in that locker room who legitimately do not know what it's like to lose a game of football that they were favored to win in. Because, last season they were 8-8. but they didn't have a quarterback, and they did very well to get to 8-8. And I'm not dismissing Mike Tomlin, the job he's done. I think he's doing a phenomenal job. Coach of the year, probably. I'd go along with that. But to win it all, you have to go through a journey, and the Steelers haven't gone through one. We saw it with the Patriots. They didn't face many difficult games in the run to their 18-0, and then what happened was they got into a dogfight and they lost, and that is what happens time and time and time again in sports. So you have to be battle hardened, and I don't think the Steelers have had that.
Who did the Patriots lose to in that Super Bowl final?
The Giants.
Damn right they did.
Yeah.
That was just there. The Steelers might come back, but Murf sent me away. He sent me packing.
Yeah, I've put a cap on the Steelers talk now.
Well, yeah, me too. I've just swapped it out. But you only know that if you're on the Periscope or the YouTube. And a beard update. I haven't touched the beard. I did my neck as was prescribed in the challenge, but so far so good. The bread knife is none too pleased with this, if I have to be honest. But hey, I'm gonna get there. I'm gonna get there.
I love it. Mine also has not been touched, even at the neck.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is not great audio for the podcast.
That's why you check out the YouTube video, watch it live, or watch it after the fact. Or do you know what? Pause the podcast, go watch the video portion up to where we are, and then go back to it.
Yeah, like a little insight, a little visual insight into the podcast.
I even gave you a little wink there, just as a little nudge and a wink to.
Here's to you, sports fans. Yeah, so it's the beginning of the week. I have to admit, I worked a lot this weekend, so I slept very early last night and caught very little ball, and then I thought I'd be doing some stuff on a mower today, and it turned out I was wood chipping again, so there was no podcast to be heard today. So I'm a little bit behind, and I have consumed as much news as possible in the last hour and a half whilst doing the lad dinner. So it's been a football cram. Did you get to watch much football, Murf?
I haven't watched Sunday Night Football, but I've watched everything else. I watched all of Red Zone. I caught some extra games in 40. I've caught Thursday Night Football in 40. So yeah, I've had time to digest and watch games. As I was watching it, I was trying to do it in a little bit this morning as I was doing research for the waiver wire. But yeah, in terms of, I haven't looked at any football for the last 9 hours. So, but I feel confident I saw a lot of things this weekend. So I think it's important to fill into the viewers in terms of what they need to do in order to win some ships.
So what you're saying is we're both coming into this podcast red hot.
That's it. Born ready.
Born ready. Man, it's nearly the end of the regular fantasy season.
I know. It's crazy how quick it's gone. Week 12 this week. So week 13 next week is the end of most people's regular seasons. So, we're looking at 13 days, 14 days until that happens. I
can't cope with how quick it is.
Right? Yeah, it is. So, 2 weeks to go. It's a real. This is the time that you will make and break your season, and this is the time that most people blame injuries, and most people blamed luck. Oh, I was on course to make the playoffs, but that last week really killed me. Don't be that guy this year. Don't be that girl this year. Don't be that person this year. Just listen to the pod, listen to the articles. I'm going to do some extra videos because, spoiler alert, I'm not working for the next 2 weeks. That doesn't mean I'm not busy, by the way, but I'm going to do some videos and some additional podcast content, but it will look better in the video to give you some tips to get through the next 2 weeks. Just don't be that person. It doesn't happen in the final week of the season. A lot of work has gone into getting to this stage in terms of getting your clinches and getting close to the edge and your point scoring. And, if you've listened to us, you would probably be doing better than most, not perfectly. There's some players we've missed on, but there's some players we absolutely nailed. And at the end of the day, if you were following this all the way through, your team's probably in pretty good shape, and the waiver wires have been absolutely fire this year, if I do say so myself. I don't normally take a victory lap, but we really hit on a lot of waiver wire targets, and the stream models looked really good as well. And I think now this is the time. So if you're new to us, if you're catching us for the first time, welcome. Appreciate you joining us.
Howdy.
Um, and let us guide you to a championship. This is the time, I think, was last season or the year before, where we picked up a massive amount of listeners. I think it was last year because he did back-to-back appearances on Joe P. Spears' podcast and Pat Fitzmaurice's podcast, and all of a sudden we picked up a load of listeners and we guided, and the amount of emails and tweets and private messages and Facebook messages that we got thanking us for giving them a championship through the guidance that we got them through. You know, I'm not saying we're the best fantasy analysts on the planet. I'm certainly not saying we're the worst because otherwise why would we be here? But we do know our staff, and ultimately we try and give you the information to make the right choice for you and your team. There's so many different scenarios. And keep comparing this to poker. It's playing the odds. Some weeks it's not going to work, but it doesn't mean the play was wrong. It just means that it just didn't work. You know, I looked at Marquise Brown and thought this was a week for Hollywood Brown that he would blow up, and he didn't. He made a massive impact in the game, even though he didn't actually get into the box score because he drew two pass interference calls that were quite big. The play was right. Just the matchup didn't happen. It was like going in with aces and losing to eights. It happens. Somebody flops an eight. It's done. It happens. You lose, but it doesn't mean that the play and the tactic was wrong. It's about a process, and if you follow that process and you follow our process, you'll get more wins than losses. And we have a lot of people that will testify to that.
Man, pocket snowmen beating pocket aces. that river flop, hey?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, well, like Murph said, there's going to be some extra content popping your way real soon, but the fantasy season is fast closing.
But it's been hard this season. I think this season's been really difficult. Not just the amount of leagues that we play and the amount of teams we put out, but I think it's genuinely there's very few real difference makers now in positions.
Mm-hmm.
I think quarterback position has got more relevant than it ever has in the last 8 years, 7 years or so. I think wide receiver has got less relevant because there's so many studs. There's so many studs now that actually the start sits with wide receivers is probably the most crucial decision every week because each team can have 4 or 5 wide receiver studs. And it's actually that the matchup content and looking at who the best plays are and why, that's the sharpest edge at wide receiver. Because, you could have had people this week who would have looked at and they could have genuinely had this choice because I can see it in a lot of teams where they would have had Justin Jefferson, Robert Woods, a T. Higgins or a Tyler Boyd-esque type player, and probably would have still had and a Keenan Allen or something like that. Like that is a wide receiver roster that is more than achievable and conceivable in most teams. And you're sitting there thinking, I've got to start 2 of these guys. Who do I start?
Mm-hmm.
And those conversations are tough. And those conversations probably, if you haven't had the right insight or, the rub of the green, have probably cost you probably more than any other position. Because for me, running back's almost like automatic. It's whoever you've got fit. It's been an absolute war of attrition at running back. That whoever you've got fit is probably starting.
Yeah, you play your
give or
best
take.
available, and that's that's it.
I mean, you probably don't have many start sit decisions at running back unless you are in the dregs and you're talking about picking
Samar J. P. Ryan or Adrian Peterson.
right, or someone Ahmed or players like that. When you literally have been so hammered that you're picking up those guys, and then it is just that sort of start sit decision between them, and that's a tough place. But that's where a lot of people are. I've had that own conversation myself. But if you played the wire smart and you picked up James Robinson and Mike Davis, cool, you're laughing right now. Like you might struggle in in the playoffs, but you're going to get there. You're going to give yourself a chance. And if you played the wire smart and you followed us, you've probably done quite well. You would have probably picked up players like McKissick, who's going to do a job for you for between now and the end of the season. There's another wave of wire person out there today. that you should go and pick up, because I think for the next week or two, believe it or not, I think he's fantasy relevant. Um, and I think that's key. And I think for me, wide receiver becomes harder because there's so many good guys. If
Mm.
you ask me now, fantasy football draft 2021, which one of these, list the top 24 wide receivers, it's hard. I genuinely would struggle because I think wide receivers one through 20, I think, are all pretty good. I'm just putting up the list now, and we've got injuries. We've got players coming back from injury that we haven't factored in, like OBJ
Yeah.
and players like that who aren't even going to be in this conversation. But you look at the top. This is the list of the top 20 wide receivers: Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, DK Metcalf, Adam Thielen, Tyler Lockett, Keenan Allen, Stephon Diggs, DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Terry McLaurin, Chase Claypool, DJ Moore, Justin Jefferson, Will Fuller, Tyler Boyd, Allen Robinson, Robbie Anderson, Amari Cooper, Mike Evans, CeeDee Lamb. Just outside of that list, Juju Smith-Schuster, AJ Brown, Robert Woods, all guys that got heavy investment capital. Now, Robert Woods is playing tonight. He can jump from 23, and if he has 10 points, 11 points, he can jump to 17
Well, in half PPR, he's
in half
19.
PPR.
He's 19 on Fantasy Pros,
I've got
and
him at 23 here on fantasy data, but half point PPR.
okay, so yeah, he's on 113, and
Yes, look.
if he gets 14 points, he'll jump into the top 10, which is definitely feasible for Robert Woods. I mean, I know it's
Because
against
Fantasy
Tampa.
Pros haven't updated yesterday's, so fantasy data update theirs earlier. So 10 is Terry McLaurin. He's on 137, which is 24 points off.
Gotcha.
So that's why the list is different. But there's still some studs here. 27, Julio Jones. Deontay Johnson, 29, because he was hurt. GJ Chark, 33. Cooper Cup, 34. Who would have thought that at the start of the season?
Mm-hmm.
But these guys can just have two good games and they'll be in the top 10. So that's what I mean. Wide receiver's so deep. It's just like, what do you do with that position next year? I genuinely don't know. I'll think
Yeah.
about it in the off season and put something together. But it shows that if you went running back heavy, you'll be sitting there cursing that strategy. But if you ended up picking three guys early and two of those stayed fit, you're probably in the playoffs already, or you're about to be,
Mm.
because you picked up the difference makers. Because DK Metcalf, fifth round player. We said this last week with Andy Singleton. Keenan Allen, fifth round player. Stephon Diggs, fifth round player. These guys weren't Tyler Lockett, fifth round player. These guys weren't top of the draft board. The only round one prospects, Hill and Adam, are up there. Okay, they're the top two. Fair play to them, but they're not giving you a massive advantage over Keenan Allen.
Yeah. The only
20
way.
points. So
The,
2 points a game in half point PPR. But if you snagged Kamara, Cook, Elliott, and then you followed them up with you picked up like James Robinson off the waiver wire, or you drafted even David Montgomery, Arojo, Antonio Gibson, sorry. Feasibly, you could have started a draft very realistically with Kamara Jacobs. You'd be laughing right now.
yeah, or even Aaron Jones.
Kamara Jones, Kamara Hunt, very possible. Kamara CEH. All of these are players that you could feasibly got. Kamara Gurley. And I'm worried about Gurley going forward. But these, you're still talking about a top 11 guy, right? Like, crazy. I just think, our strategy, and I'm not trying to just give us loads of pats on the back here, but I think our strategy at the start of the season, when we talk about draft strategy, load up running backs quickly, pick up your value wide receivers in the middle rounds, and pick up a good quarterback towards the end. If you followed that and you hit the right players, and the way in your draft fell for you, you've probably done quite well.
Yeah.
I mean, if you took McCaffrey, Barkley, sidelined by injury, that's tough. But the strategy was right. The strategy is pointing towards that working.
I wrote. Do you remember I wrote that article saying 0 RB was the way to go in the first 2 rounds? Because if you were on drafting at 9-10, because Adams and Hill were there.
Yeah.
And then you can get Gurley, CH, Connor.
Yeah.
I mean, if you drafted Adams, Hill, Connor, and Gurley, or Carson Gurley, someone like that
That's
at the
paid off
third,
for you.
fourth. Yeah, I mean, I was.
Well, I mean, you had to ridden the weeks without Adams, but yeah, again, that's another way of getting to the playoffs. So we put together a couple of different strategy points, but ultimately they were avoid tight end early and avoid quarterback early.
Mhm.
And because the quarterback early strategy hasn't worked yet again, as we say every year, it doesn't work. People that took Lamar Jackson, all right, if you took Travis Kelsey, you probably have a bit of advantage of that position. But Kelsey's like the wide receiver 40. He's not returning a huge volume. He's not giving you he's giving you a massive advantage at tight end, but he's not in points in terms of accumulating points. He's not giving you this huge advantage that many people think he probably is.
Well, no. So on Fantasy Pros, I know they're behind, but he currently, without the games added, he had a 50-point gap at 139, basically 140, 1399.
Yeah.
But then you look at the wide receivers, and he's on pace with Tyler Lockett here at 6. So
Really?
yeah,
I'm gonna look this up.
That's what Fantasy Pros is telling me. Even if their data is behind, come on, tags, sort it out.
Yeah, no, okay. So if you'd hit Kelsey, that probably's paid off for you.
But then,
Yeah, so yeah, he'd be ahead of Lockett actually, and ahead of Phelan. He'd be behind DK Metcalf. He'd be 4th. So he'd be the wide receiver 4 in half point.
I
Still,
guess
it's good going.
Yeah,
I didn't realize he must his last 2 games have been big.
Yeah, he showed up last night, big time. Right, Murph. Before the time runs away and the witching hour approaches, let's do some news. And we start with the sad news that Joe Burrow suffers a season-ending ACL injury, and it has been confirmed that his season over is. And with all ACL injuries, I have not seen this one because I do not go there. That is the Voldemort of the world for me. I heard it was up by his face, so not good.
It was bad. It was a really bad injury. It was as he was getting sacked. I mean, we said it all season that offensive line was going to get him killed, and that's exactly what's happened. They rushed 3, they rushed 4, got home, and it's a nasty injury. It's not malicious. It's a perfectly clean tackle. It's just the boot gets stuck a little bit in the dirt, and it's there's just been a breaking news alert literally as I'm talking about this with Burrow, and his injury is even worse than expected. He has suffered tore ACL, MCL, and other structural damage.
I know how that feels.
You've been there. You're the expert here.
Yeah.
This could be really bad. You're talking about this. We're talking about potentially him not making the starter next season if this is as bad as people are saying.
Yeah, well, I did ACL, PCL, and MCL. Luckily, I did no bone or cartilage damage on the meniscus. But yeah, that was 5 months. I didn't take a step for 5 months, and then I had another 2 months of rehab. So I imagine his life's going to be, his care will be greater than mine. But if it is structural damage and he needs to, yeah, man, that's bad. That's not good.
So tough time ahead for Joe Burrow, and we send him we send best wishes and hope that he recovers. He's been a breath of fresh air this year. He's really played with no fear,
and maturity as well.
Yeah, and listen, it's not yielded the win total that probably his play deserves, but no doubt they've got a player for the future if he can recover from this injury.
100%. And hey, Joe, silver lining, the rehab pool where I went was nice and toasty, so at least you weren't cold where you were. Oh, man, do you know what I had to do? I had to stand on my good leg and write the alphabet with my not broken toes, but the toes that were on my smashed up knee. Just stand there for 40 minutes, continually writing the alphabet with my other foot. That was, man, there's 26 letters get real boring real fast.
Oh, I bet.
Frank Gore on a possible 0-16 season. I can't go out like this. So the Jets
He's back
terrible.
next season.
Yeah.
This is Frank Gore saying, sign me someone. I'm back next season. Frank Gore, for his 148th season in the NFL, is still trudging along. Hey, listen, he scored at the weekend, and he's in the waiver wire column this week.
Frank Gore, Houston Texan next year. Mark my words.
That's not a bad shout, actually. That really isn't a bad shout. Or Seattle.
Well, yeah, they use everyone, so it could well be Seattle, but yeah, Houston, I can just see it.
That makes sense. Listen, I'm not against that signing. I think that's that's fine.
So from one stud running back to another, Ezekiel Elliott said the Cowboys are right where they need to be in the NFC least.
I mean, it's a way to put a positive spin on a 3-win season. We're half a game out, boys. We got it's in our own hands, and
division.
technically it is. I mean, it's a hell of a spin move. I mean, Alistair Campbell would be proud of this kind of spin that they're generating. I genuinely don't know who wins the division now, because the whole division's split by half a game. Philly have it on the tie at the moment, but they've been awful.
They are
awful.
dire.
And whereas, I'm looking at it and thinking, well, the Giants haven't been that bad. Like, they've been bad, but they haven't been that bad. They've been competitive in games. The Washingtons are, I mean...
Is that where we're going with it now? The Washingtons?
Well, I'll be honest, I've stolen that off Ross Tucker. He always calls them the Washington, so it's kind of stuck in my head. I think... I don't think Alex Smith is good enough to get in there, so I can rule out Washington.
Question. I've got my hand up for those watching on Periscope. How many points did Alex Smith get last night in fantasy? Do you have any idea?
Not a lot.
Oh, well,
Eight,
there was in a league where I was decimated at quarterback. I started Alex
I mean,
Smith.
it depends on the league settings, right? But at 4-point TD, I don't think he scored a ton. I'm going to tell you now, on a 4-point league,
Please be more than 8.
I think it was a smidge more. He did throw a touchdown, but it
Sims
wasn't.
got in, didn't he? It wasn't more than 8.
8:34.
Oh dear Lord.
I mean, I'll give you his line: 17 of 25, 166, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception, and he had -3 yards rushing.
Thank you, Alex. Well,
which I think were the Neils. Like, the way that the RotoWire have written that is, he's had -3 on 3 rushing attempts. Yeah, he probably took a knee 3 times at the end of the game, victory formation.
Yeah, well, we're talking about Alex Smith, and let's talk about the fact he's won his first game in just over 2 years, which is 742 days, as Washington beat the now Joe Burrow-less Bengals.
I mean, kudos to him for getting back, and kudos for him to get on the field to play a game. I mean, hats off. Like, sporting competitiveness is incredible. Did Alex Smith overly contribute to that victory?
No.
I think that defense finally got a reward for the hard work that they put in all season, because I think that Washington defense is very good. Chase Young's incredible.
Chase Young is phenomenal.
So yeah, kudos to Alex Smith. I think he's done a great job, but yeah, I don't think he is at the level that he needs to be a NFL starter quarterback for years to come.
Yeah, just looking at the points given up to positions, they rank top 10 against the quarterback. So they're top 10 good against the quarterback. They're not great against running back.
Well, that's because teams just run against them.
Yeah, exactly.
When they're winning, it's just game script. So they probably face more rushes than most teams.
Well, they're the second best team against the pass, against wide receivers, and then they are they're 8th, so not great against tight end, but that's only 9.4 points a game from fantasy, so because tight ends don't really matter unless you try Kelsey anymore. So yeah, the Washington defense is really good, and yeah, Ryan Kerrigan got a sack last night, which I was pleased about because I started him in a real deep IDP league, and I've been starting him all year because he did well last year, and it's so deep that he got me a sack. So well done, Ryan Kerrigan. Tua, hang on, Lee, this one's for you. Sorry, mate. Tua was benched last night in the defeat to the Broncos for performance reasons, but he will start in week 12. They've already come out and said that he's going to start. And I was talking to Lee Murf before you got here because Lee is behind the glass making this magic on the video world. He said,
for those of us who want to report us for breach of COVID, we're in different locations. It's a metaphorical glass, not an actual pane of glass.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair,
I just don't want to get fined.
No, that's
in
fine.
The famous words of Marshall Lynch. I'm just here because I'm not going to get fined.
He could just be the other side of the glass, literally just there, which would be outside.
Yeah. Either way, I'm just making it clear.
But no, Lee is down on the south coast. He's far enough away that we're not going to get in COVID trouble. But yeah, Tua was benched in defeat to the Broncos, but we talked about this earlier, and he said that it was just a game script thing. The game wasn't going to get any better with Tua, whereas Fitz gave them that chance, and he took them up, they scored, and then he took them up again, and there was an interception in the red zone. So could have drawed it up, could have made the level, and could have been a different game. But
Well, I mean, I watched this, right, and I think this is a really dangerous. So when Tua was taken out of the game, he was being benched, and he'd been sacked on the play before that. And the line going around on the commentary was, well, it looks like he might have just been hurt. And that's the line I would have played if I'm Brian Flores, because then you're not creating this quarterback controversy, and you're also not really overly denting your quarterback. What Brian Flores here, and listen, I think Brian Flores has done an incredible job. But I think what Brian Flores here is he's done the dirt cutter here that says, basically, if you don't perform, I'm going to pull you. Oh, Stocks has gone. There's some picture of a cat. There we go.
yeah, I don't know where the cat came from.
Lovely.
I panicked extremely fast there, and then
I love it. Little cat, little ginger Tom, just sitting there. But
you only get that on the YouTube experience.
But my point is that with Tua, what you've done now is you've set that precedent. If he's not good enough in games, that Ryan Fitzpatrick's going to come in.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes one of two ways. It either lights a fire under Tua, but given that he's in his first season, he's only played a few games, it's probably not what he needs. I think that's a mistake. I would have stayed with the narrative of, listen, it was precautionary. We know how good Ryan is. The game was on the line. We felt comfortable putting Ryan in that situation. But at the end of the day, we did not want to take the chance with Tua, and we decided to rest him. Whether that's the right line or not, that's the line you put in the media. And even if you're still trying to do work on Tua, you can do that behind the scenes. What you've done now is every time Tua makes a bad pass, every time Tua has a bad game, and I know I've lived this as a fan with James Winston and Ryan Fitzpatrick, you're sitting there waiting for the quarterback change. And it's going to be, you'll see shots of the sidelines now whenever the Dolphins are trailing by 2 scores. When's Fitzpatrick coming in? That is now that nasty thing that is going to be in the background. I just think that was played. I appreciate the honesty from Brian Flores. I think that was probably, in the media's sake, the wrong move. I would have just let them keep the narrative of it was an injury, and that's why. Because Tua's already been named as the starter for next week.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not moving away from Tua for starting, but they've made that leash very short.
Yeah. Thankfully, the glass is pretty thick and Lee can't respond to that comment. So let's move on. Doug Peterson says there's no question Wentz will remain the starter in Philly, despite throwing 14 touchdowns, 14 interceptions in 10 games so far this season for the Eagles. And
he is up there for one of the worst pick sixes I've ever seen. And I watched James Winston for a shed load last season. Right? I've seen a lot of pick sixes in my time. I've been spoiled. It's like having an own, like a classic VHS of amazing pick sixes. This one is right up there with the absolute worst of them. So he's dropped back to pass. Miles Sanders has gone. He's gone to set the screen. He's thrown the ball to probably about 2 yards, a yard and a half in front of Sanders. So he's got no chance at the play. And Simone Tikataki, or Taki, Tikataki, or it's Tikataki, it's Taki, sorry, of the Browns, the linebacker, second-year linebacker. It's just literally gone, there's no one around. Cheers. Straight in. Pick six. On a screen. I mean, I don't think I've seen like where it's been tipped and on a screen, but this one was just bosh. Bye. It was bad. I mean, it was bad. I mean, Wentz looked afterwards. He was just like, what do I do here? Yeah. I mean, it was bad. And is that on Sanders? Is that on Wentz? It's probably a little bit of both. But Wentz ultimately just was made to look very, very, very silly. And ultimately, interesting fact about that game, that was the first game all season where there was not an offensive point scored in the first half. It was 7-0 Cleveland at the break, and that was the tiebreaker.
Good Lord.
Tough watch.
What
the rain and everything did it, but also the fact that you got a quarterback who's thrown 14 touchdowns or 14 interceptions, and you got another quarterback who doesn't really throw the ball or pass it or run with it, and he's just basically like a living statue. On the other side, it doesn't make for great television.
No, no. The Eagles look a little bit lost at sea right now, and
Yeah, I mean, I why not bring 41-year-old Josh McCown in?
oh, you've got Jalen Hurts. I mean,
Yeah,
draft him in the second round to not use him. I mean,
yeah, maybe. I don't know. It's interesting. We'll see what happens with that one.
absolutely. And then finally in the news, Clowney and Mixon lead the big names that have headed to IR at the weekend before the Week 11 games started.
Yeah, and
Jo-
obviously you can add Joe Burrow to that since, but yeah,
yeah, true.
mind you, to be honest, I think Clowney, the IR kind of saves him because he's contributed absolutely zero this season to the Titans. He has been dismal.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have paid me $10 million and I'd probably play better than that.
I mean, I would have given it a damn good thrashing for $10 million.
Oh,
That's for
listen,
sure.
I'd have worked my butt off for it.
I'd have turned up. I'd have been the first one there and the last one out. But hey, talking of Joe Burrow, let's do some Week 11 takeaways, Murph. Where does Joe Burrow's injury leave the Bengals' skill position players rest of season for fantasy?
I think they're all a massive arrow down. So when you're sitting there and you're looking at what Joe Burrow did, he elevated these players quite extraordinary in a great way. Um, so just going to look at a few different things. So I'm looking at basically how frequently the team are playing, like the receivers and what's going on. There's a few things going on. First of all, now that Mixon's out, what happens with that backfield? Those of you that own Giovanni Bernard, he was great in the first couple of weeks. He deputized um, for Joe Mixon, but there was a real trend yesterday where he only played 54% of snaps, whereas those games before he played 68, 64%, and 76%. So,
Right.
he had a massive workload. And that's because the other P Ryan, Samanji P Ryan, he played 46% of snaps yesterday. So there was only 6 snaps difference in them. For the running game, I think both these guys now, if I had to own one, which I probably don't really want to, P Ryan would be probably the one I would own because they kind of want to see what they've got. What are they playing for now? They're not going to win the division. They're not going to make the playoffs. Um, but the other problem is that they're going to be behind in so many games. Whereas Joe Burrow was throwing and throwing and throwing to keep them in games, I don't see them using the run option against that in that poor offensive line
Mm.
and to try and establish the run to give Brian Finley a break. I mean, they might do, and if they do, P Ryan's the guy I want. But effectively, both those guys are borderline rosterable right now, especially looking at that trend. And it's one game, so I want to preface that it's one game. But P Ryan's work in the last 4 games has been 25%, 33%, 25%, now 46%. I think P Ryan is the guy who's going to take Giovanni Bernard's job for at least the next 2 weeks.
Hmm.
Ultimately, I don't think I'm brave enough to start him unless I'm in a very deep league and I'm desperate. Looking at the wide receivers, I think everyone's an arrow down. So, you know, for me, there's three rosterable wide receivers. The first one's AJ Green. I'm probably on the verge of dropping him.
But he scored at the weekend, Murph.
Great for him. He caught a ball off Joe Burrow, which is not what he's going to be doing off Ryan Finley. I can tell
No.
you that for free. Um, I just think he is someone who he's on the field, but this offense isn't going to be good enough to support 3 wide receivers. Ryan Finley's not going to be good enough. So for me, AJ Green is probably the guy that makes way. I think T. Higgins is borderline startable, but he's rosterable. So I think you can have him on a roster, but I don't think he is someone who every week I'm probably going to fade out of lineups unless desperate. I think Tyler Boyd's the only one who is a little bit, I don't want to say quarterback proof. I think he's narrowed down, but I still think he is that borderline wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 going forward. But ultimately, Ryan Finley's not someone I'm keen to play in fantasy football. I'd probably say moving forward, I think Tyler Boyd's probably the only one on this offense I feel half confident putting in the lineup. Anyone else, I'm probably having to really think or fade.
Yeah, it's not a pretty place right now in Cincinnati for fantasy. Moving on to somewhere that isn't quite pretty at the moment, the Ravens backfield I mean, the Ravens as a whole, but the Ravens backfield, what is going on? Where are we with them?
Well, it's sorted now. We now know where we are. It took 11 weeks. But, looking at the snap counts and the usage yesterday, J.K. Dobbins finally has this job. And it was a big coming out party yesterday for him. He scored. He made the most of his usage. So let me read the stat lines for the three of them yesterday. J.K. Dobbins, 17 touches, 15 rushes for 70 and a score, with 2 catches for 15, receiving on 2 targets. Gus Edwards went 3 rushes for 6, no receiving targets. Mark Ingram went 2 rushes for 2 yards with 0 receiving targets. And then when you look at their snap share yesterday, J.K. Dobbins played on 63% of the snaps. Gus Edwards played on 20% of the snaps. Mark Ingram played on 9% of the snaps. He done. You got Mark Ingram on the roster, cut him. Cut him. Cut him for anything. Doesn't matter. Whatever you pick up is better than Mark Ingram. Mark Ingram is done. He is done. Finished. Finito. Unless you're in a dynasty league and you hope he gets a better job next year. That's probably the only reason I'd keep him. But if you're in a redraft league, he can go. You've got no worries. Pick up Sam GP, right? He's got more upside.
Come on, Samaje.
Yeah, that's it, Samaje. I'm terrible with names. But you can cut him. You can cut Justice Hill. At this point, Gus Edwards is pretty much a handcuff.
Yeah.
But there are better ones out there to own. So I think for me, now I feel more confident. This is the moment where we had this with Swift a few weeks ago. I'm at that point with J.K. Dobbins now. I feel comfortable. I can put him in a lineup every week. I still don't think he's going to give you RB1 numbers, but I think he's a good RB2 option for the rest of the stretch.
Yep. And then he's got the ability to get into the backfield, and once he's in the backfield, he keep going. So he's got the ability to break
And he showed
off
some
a
power
big
on the
play.
goal line yesterday. He got the goal line touches. He made the most of them. He scored. He's got some real power. Like, fair play to him. I think he's got this job now. It's taken longer than I think anyone anticipated or hoped, but I think he's done a good job over the last couple of weeks, and he's earned his role just like Swift has.
Absolutely. Moving on. I don't know which direction that is in the country, but let's talk some Jets. Do they look better with Flacco under center? And what do we do with them for fantasy?
I think they do look better with Flacco. I think Flacco gives them more purpose. And he knows what he is. He's someone who not very mobile. He can get out of the pocket, but he's not the most mobile guy. He can't really throw on the run, but he's an accurate deep ball passer. And all of a sudden, you bring in people like Perryman, who had a game yesterday. You bring him into play. And finally, they're starting to get something out of Perriman. This is Perriman's season. Perriman does nothing for 10, 11 weeks because he knows he's on contract now. He did this with the Browns 2 years ago, where he did nothing for 10 games, turns up in the final 6 games, gets a contract with Tampa, signs a 1-year, $4 million deal, does nothing for 10 games, and then all of a sudden turns up the last few games, the last 2 weeks, he's a fantasy MVP. Gets a not a big contract, but a bigger contract with the Jets, done nothing. Anyway, injuries, all this, whatever, right? But ultimately, he turns up when the money's due to be paid, and he needs a new deal. This is Perriman time now, where he actually, with Flacco there, is relevant. And they played well yesterday, the Jets. I think, they weren't that embarrassing laughing stock that they had been. They really fought back. They got it to within 6 points. All right, to be fair, the Chargers deliberately took the safety because they were trying to run the clock out, and they left a second on the clock, which made it an 8-point or a 6-point game. But ultimately, they did put an effort in to try and win that game, and they looked better with Flacco, and the offense, the running game looked better with Flacco there. There seemed to be some more direction. There was some better communication. Gore and P. Ryan both scored. Both of them look good. P. Ryan's got an injury now. Don't know what that's going to look like for this week. I would play Flacco till the end of the season, especially if you're going to give Trevor Lawrence. If you're going to pick Trevor Lawrence, now is the time to rid yourself of Sam Darnold. And in fact, Andy said it best last week. Why didn't they field an offer for him? I mean, really, you're only putting Sam Darnold out there now for trade bait, to say, oh, well, he's still our guy. We'll field offers. But really, Joe Flacco is a better quarterback than Sam Darnold. And that's a hard thing for me to say. That's a hard thing for you to say, or even hear, given how bad he was in Denver last year. But he has taken that dismal offense and he made them a little bit relevant. Not massively relevant, but a little bit. Uh, the big arrow down for this, if Flacco is the starter, is Jameson Crowder. He goes to borderline droppable. He's just not being used with Flacco. Love it. Gone with a Jets hat.
Yeah,
So
I just saw it.
if Flacco is the starter, if you own Jameson Crowder, just don't put him in the lineup. It's just not going to work. You're better off going with Herndon. Herndon looked good. You're better off going with Perriman. They're the guys who are going to get the work under Flacco. Big stretch target guys who are going to pick up chunk yardage, and the running backs will be more relevant.
Yeah, it's be interesting to see what Tom thinks about that. I'm sure once he hears this, he'll let us know. But I might send him a message beforehand just to tell him that we've talked good about his Jets on the podcast for once. Staying in the New York area-ish, what do we do with the Patriots now? They seem to be throwing the ball more. I started Jacoby Myers over Cooper Kupp this week in our home dynasty league because Myers had been going well, and he got me 6 points. So
To be fair, in that home dynasty league, you've outscored everyone except the person in second by like 400 points.
yeah, I mean, I've got
So
a
it
good
doesn't
team.
matter. I mean,
No,
it
but
doesn't. It doesn't matter if you start. Like,
my point in that was that the process I picked
Yeah.
Myers because he was good because the Patriots are now throwing more
Yeah.
over Cooper Kupp, who has a has a maybe tough matchup against your Father Cannon's Bucks tonight.
Yeah, and listen, Damari Bird was brilliant in this game. He got open, he separated. I like the play. I think it made sense. I think Jacoby Myers and Damari Bird. I think one of those players will be fantasy relevant for most weeks through the rest of the season. It's about looking at the matchups and trying to discern which one. But there were some special plays that were scripted purely for Damari Bird in this particular game against the Texans, and he looked good. And I think both of these guys are rosterable, Myers and Damari Bird. I think Damari Bird's the wide receiver 2 going into tonight's games for the week. So Cam threw for 366 yards, I believe. It was over 360. Just the one touchdown, which was to Bird. But they seem to be putting the ball in the air more. Not great news for Damian Harris. Mind you, they were trailing in the game. I think they're going to trail in other games as well. I think they realize that they're not going to make the playoffs now. They're just going to run riot. And I think for me, I think Bird, Myers, rosterable. I think Damian Harris will still hold that job at running back going forward. I think he'll be fine. I think he'll be a low end RB2. Michelle will be a bit of a nuisance, like a fly that you want to squat. But ultimately, I don't think he's going to do so much. And then I think James White, he had a decent day yesterday. I think he's just about rosterable. And he might produce sort of games like he did yesterday, but I don't expect too much. I wouldn't be putting James White in a roster unless in a starting lineup unless I literally have no one else.
Yeah, I mean, didn't Rex Burkhead hit the IR yesterday as well?
Yeah, so that's another one. Burkhead's done ACL, so he's done for the year.
That does help James White value a little bit because Burkhead was get some of the passing plays, whereas now it will just be all James White. So maybe we see a little bit of an uptick for James White in the reception game.
Yeah.
Who knows? And then finally, week 11, what are we doing with the tight end position for the rest of the season if you don't own Kelsey, Waller, Andrews, or Dallas Goedert?
I mean, you're streaming it basically. You're just looking at good matchups. Anyone else is to add to that list. Trey Burton maybe is one that you can keep on a roster. He scored yesterday, but yeah, there just isn't really anyone on there that you need to be worried about. I'd be picking Jordan Reed off IR. I think he's probably the best bet between now and the end of the year. I left Gronk off this list. I don't know why. Gronk is rosterable for the rest of the year and startable. He's probably a top 5 tight end now for the rest of the year. I think outside of those guys, Johnny Smith is going to be a bit of a bust. Had a decent day yesterday, but I think it depends on the matchup. Dalton Schultz scored yesterday again, touchdown or bust. Robert Tonyan, touchdown or bust. All these guys are touchdown or busts. Look at the matchups. Look at who has the best matchups against tight ends, fantasy tight ends, week to week. Try and get ahead. Stream that position. We'll give you the picks, but look at who performs well. Which teams perform badly against tight ends, and pick up and roster those tight ends in advance. And just stream it because you're more likely to be searching for the touchdown or bust guys with the matchup play than you are just randomly just picking a guy or just hoping that Jimmy Graham scores. I mean, Jimmy Graham might not have a quarterback this week throwing him the ball. Both Trubisky and Foles are injured. Dalton Schultz. Don't rely on Andy Dalton to be picking out his tight end every week. It's not going to happen. Yes, it happened in the clutch moment of a game, but it was busted coverage. It was bad. Um, it, Logan Thomas, I like for volume, but again, Alex Smith, is he going to throw a load of touchdowns? Probably not. So again, you're looking at guys and you're looking at matchups outside of Jordan Reed off the waiver wire, who I think is startable every week for the rest of the season. You're streaming the best matchup. That's what you've got to do.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that. Oh, shout out to CD Lamb, by the way, last night. If you have not seen CD Lamb's catch from last night, goodness gracious me. Diving backwards over his shoulder into the end zone. CD Lamb, that's why you were on my number one overall wide receiver last night. Did you see? You must have seen the
Oh
catch.
yeah, unbelievable catch. I mean, it's the way that he contorts and twists his body
Yeah.
to bend it. Adam Thielen also had an amazing catch, a one-handed grab while being held in that game. They were two of the best catches I've seen all season. Um, Another play was AJ Brown. He's being held or tackled or attempted to be tackled by four Baltimore Ravens players, and he just literally outmuscled them all to get into the end zone. I mean, there were some phenomenal plays um, last night, but that Cowboys Vikings game had two of the best catches I've seen in quite some time, and it was pretty special to watch.
I'm going to have to go and check out Thielen's because I have not seen it.
He's right in the corner of the end zone, so he's basically gone up. He's being held. I mean, they threw the flag. It would have been holding. He's literally got up, grabbed it with one hand, right in the corner, gets the feet down. Absolutely unbelievable. It's not as good as Lamb's, because I think the way that Lamb is going this way and he has to literally twist his body like that to take the catch is incredible.
Body control was unbelievable from Lamb on that catch. Right, Murph, we're into the final minutes. I say minutes. We've got a little while. Let's do Are You Panicking? Today's segment. 3 players you need to have serious panic over on a scale of slight panic, which is 1, to try and get rid of, or get number 5, which is find a replacement, sharpish. Who are your 3 players? Would you like to do all 3 one at a time? Where do you want to go with this? How do you want to do it?
Let's alternate it. So I'll start and I'll go with Tyler Boyd. So I mentioned him. I mentioned he's narrowed down. I've got him in at 3. I just worry about the volume with Ryan Finley. You're talking about a guy who's not played for a year. You're talking about a guy who probably isn't an NFL caliber quarterback. I think at the moment, Boyd's ceiling is probably wide receiver 3. That's probably his ceiling. He might have a couple of wide receiver 2 games going forward, but yeah, I don't. I'm in one of my home leagues where I play. I traded Tyler Boyd for. I was a bit worried about Zeke, so I got Pollard and Darius Slayton. Now that looks like a great bit of business now, because I'd take Slayton over Boyd now all day long. And then the fact that I got the handcuff now, I mean, that was a risky trade. um, but I felt I needed a backup Zeke because I got no one on the bench. And I was like, I need to have that insurance. And to pick that up. And then now it looks like that trade has turned right on its head. And I'm delighted with it, because now it's panned out. Obviously not happy with the way that it's come about, but yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. So I think, yeah, I'm pretty worried about Boyd. I think he's a 3. I think you need to be thinking about other options. If you can trade him, it's going to be very hard to trade him. Maybe just use his numbers from last year as a way of trying to do that. But yeah, it's going to be pretty hard to trade him.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody who I would like to try and shift is Julio Jones. Now, I've got him as a 4, and it's Murph's going to mention the schedule in a minute for the Falcons coming up, and it isn't that kind. And I think possibly we are seeing the start of the decline of Julio Jones. Age might be creeping up to him. I mean, he went out with hamstring injury, came back, made an unbelievable catch yesterday, and then left with a hamstring injury again. Since week 6, he is the wide receiver 3 in half PPR. So I think if you could sell high on him now before the difficult schedule sets in, I think it's a good move. And I think Tyler Lockett's had a couple of down weeks. So I think I think Julio Jones for Tyler Lockett right now would be a great trade if you can pull that one off.
Yeah, I think potentially, I think that's not a bad move. I don't think you'll probably get that many takers, given if people just look at where they are points wise. But yeah, I think if you can get anything for Julio Jones right now, it's probably not a bad time to ship him. Um, I would say that there's a lot of guys. Robert Woods would be a good target, really.
True. Or either of the
Or,
Rams wide
or
receivers.
either the Rams wide receivers, because I think they pick up. Yeah, definitely be thinking about that one moving forward. I think that's a good move. So I've gone with Todd Gurley for very, very similar reasons. Now, Todd Gurley, uh, Todd Gurley's been bad. You wouldn't believe it. So I've got him as a 4 out of 5. He's been bad. He's been bad for probably about 4 weeks now. But he's been masking it with touchdowns. He scored that accidental touchdown against Detroit. He had a bad game. He scores that touchdown. He saves you. He scored another touchdown in a game where he didn't play very well. He had the Saints. He scored 29 yards last night. He just he does not look like the Todd Gurley of old. Now, on the one hand, if you drafted him in the third round, it's paid off dividends. Like
Mm.
he has got you enough points to get you into that position, but he's also the guy that's going to cost you your fantasy championship if you continue to play him week to week. Be very thankful that he's got to. And listen, I got a lot of Turk early. I took a lot of him in the late third round because he was available. He was free. I was like, why not? And it's paying off. Running back 10, running back 11 at this point. Thanks very much. He's got me to where I need to get him, or where I needed to get to, which is in the playoffs in a lot of those teams. But now, this is his schedule against the run. So he's got the Saints again, where he was terrible. He's got the Buccaneers with the best run defense. He's got the Chiefs. Now, the Chiefs you don't look at as a massively great run defense, even though they're not bad. But the game script is going to go massively against them because they're going to be 20, 30 points down before they know it. And then before it's like, well, they can't afford to establish the run there because they're going to be behind. So Todd Gurley for me is just a massive. If whatever you can get for him right now is going to be better. And if your trade deadline has gone, you need to be thinking off the waiver wire. Who are players I can stream in that position instead of Todd Gurley, and look at that from a matchup perspective and say, is this person on a week to for this week going to get me more points than Todd Gurley? I would be looking at Frank Gore, and if Lamicro P Ryan is out next week, I would say hand on heart that I believe. Actually, not next week because he does have a good matchup next week, Todd Gurley. But I think that's the last of his good matchups, really. I think after that, I'd be looking at streaming a running back in exchange for Todd Gurley, and don't even be afraid to drop him, especially for championship week. Bucks and Chiefs, no thanks.
Yeah, I feel you. I have Todd Gurley in that aforementioned dynasty league, and it scares me starting him. But like we also mentioned earlier, I don't have anyone else. So if I can't flip him, I'm going to be starting him.
No, because unfortunately for you, I'm mostly ahead of you on record in terms of I'm so far behind on record, and I have no running backs and never had running backs in that league. So I just literally just pick up every streamable running back every week.
I literally cannot win get a waiver claim at all in that league.
No,
it's tough. It's tough.
It's tough being 10 and 400 points above everybody else.
No, I just meant for waivers.
I mean, first world problems.
Yeah, I mean, come at me. It's my title to lose. It's my title to lose. My second one is Lamar Jackson, and I've got him as a 3. Now, he is currently on the behind Fantasy Pros thing that we talked about earlier. He is where is he now? Number 9. He's the 9th quarterback overall, and he's averaging 20.65 points a game. He is not the fantasy prospect we saw last year. Something has changed in Baltimore. I don't know what it is. They are not running the same plays they did last year, and it is hurting Lamar Jackson's fantasy output. Now, if you look at, I think you can stream your quarterback options. If you own Lamar Jackson, if he has any tasty matchup, sure, you can play him, but I think you could stream your quarterbacks around Jackson's matchups. If you look at the players around him currently on the list, you've got Teddy Bridgewater at 10, Ryan Tannehill at 11, Big Ben at 12. Going slightly further down, you've got Matty Stafford at 17. Now he's averaging 18.3. Big Ben's 19. Ryan Tannehill's nearly 20. Teddy Bridgewater's 18.7. So I think you can stream your quarterbacks based on matchups, even if you own Lamar Jackson right now.
I'm going to counter that slightly, only in the sense of more people have rostered quarterbacks this season than any season I've ever seen in fantasy football, and you might struggle to stream. Um, I'll give you an example. My waiver wire options this week are, um, and literally, I tell you, it took me no time to decide this. Daniel Jones and Kirk Cousins, because the next best option on there was, I want to say Drew Lock. I might even be wrong. Like literally, there's just no one to pick from at under 30% threshold. Now, listen, you might be in a league where people aren't stacking a load of quarterbacks, and if that's the case, that's great news. I'm hoping that with 2 weeks to go until the end of the fantasy regular season, people are going to start dropping quarterbacks for usable players in other positions. There's not many bye weeks left to cover. In fact, I don't think anyone's on bye this week.
Nope.
So literally the only two teams left on bye next week, and it's the Buccaneers and Carolina. I would be looking at getting, um, just try and pick up a quarterback. I mean, it's hard with Lamar because he brings you safety with the floor, but he doesn't bring you a high ceiling. Um, you basically are going to need to find, if you can find, if Tom Brady's on your waiver wire, he's someone I would play over Lamar Jackson week to week. And I'm not just saying that because the Buccaneers, even though it's a bye. I mean, he's
No,
ahead of
I
him.
was laughing because it was the most obvious statement you've probably ever made.
Oh, okay. Well, you would, yeah, but if we'd said this 6 months ago, people would have laughed at us and thought, what the hell are these guys talking about?
True.
Big Ben, I'd play over Lamar most weeks. It's a hard one because I think Lamar's fine. Like he's in that position where we kind of expected him to be if he didn't have last season.
Yeah.
Like he's a fringe QB1, and a fringe QB1 is fine in fantasy football. He's not going to lose you any weeks. He's not going to win you a lot of weeks. He's just going to do a job, and you leave it to the other positions. And there is something about having a set and forget quarterback, but yeah.
It frightens me starting Lamar as my quarterback. That's the only reason I put it in there because I want to feel safe starting Lamar, and like you say, he has that floor, but it just scares me a smidge.
But having said that, right, if you gave me the choice right now to start Lamar Jackson or Deshaun Watson for the rest of the season, I'd pick Lamar Jackson because of the schedule.
Well, that's music to my ears. Murf,
So
we've got...
I think the basis of this is if you've got Lamar Jackson, I'm less panicked than you because the alternative scares me. And
Okay.
and there are quarterbacks ahead of him. Deshaun Watson, I think, has got a tough matchup, a tough schedule going forward. That is not pretty. Um, you know, and if you've picked up Murray, Mahomes, Wilson, Josh Allen, you don't have Lamar Jackson, right? You wouldn't have both of them. Yeah, okay. In a dynasty league where you rinsed 4 teams in that league of players, then you would. But in other leagues, in normal leagues, you wouldn't have a situation where that would really be an option, especially season long.
Sure.
So for me, I'm thinking of players I'm starting over Lamar, Big Ben. I gotta be honest, the quarterbacks below him, that is probably about it. I'm starting Lamar over Tannehill, and Brady, I definitely would play over. But I'm looking at quarterbacks, say below him, just below him, Teddy Bridgewater, no thank you, and he's injured. Matt Ryan, no thank you. Carson Wentz, certainly no thank you. Derek Carr, probably not. Cam
So what
Newton, no. Matt Stafford, no. Kirk Cousins. This week would be interesting. I'd probably start Kirk Cousins over Lamar potentially, but then I like the safety, and you don't know what you always get with Kirk Cousins because he's anything but consistent.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. I double bluffed you. I put this in here because I was personally worried, and now I'm not. So
Yeah, I
congratulations.
wouldn't be
Thanks.
I wouldn't be overly worried. I think there's more players to be worried about than Lamar. Like this person, Miles Sanders. I don't have tons of Miles Sanders. I have a couple of teams of him in, and my panic levels are 5. It's a 5. I'm genuinely concerned. Now, I'm well known for going on television in America saying that Miles Sanders was a bad bet. And if you haven't, I've got the clip. I prove it, right? I sat in this very chair in this very room and said on American television, which probably about 9 people watched, and said that Miles Sanders would be a terrible player to draft in fantasy football this season. I took him I took him in an auction league because most of the good players went, and I had to take someone, and I took him in a couple of other leagues because he fell around more than he should have done, and I took him, and I think I took him once as an auto draft because I didn't set enough players in my queue. But I don't have much of him. But I mean, let's put it this way: he's at the moment the RB25 in 0.5 PPR. All right, he's missed a game or two of injuries, whatever. He's got the sixth hardest schedule to running backs coming in. So the Seahawks, the Packers, the Saints, and the Cardinals. So they're all games that Philly are going to be trailing. They're all games that, like the Packers don't have a great run defense because they can't stop anyone. I said it yesterday when um, Jonathan Taylor just literally waltzed through them without getting touched. They don't have a great run defense, but having said that, people don't run on them because they're so far behind the Packers in most instances that you
Yeah.
can't. Are Philadelphia going to be able to keep up with the Packers on a scoring route? Absolutely not. So they're going to have to throw the ball. So Miles Sanders isn't going to get a ton of work. Miles Sanders doesn't get 100-yard games. He just doesn't. It doesn't happen. He is basically a touchdown or bust running back right now. If you can con somebody into giving you, I mean, right now, right? If someone said to me, and I've just sat here and said that Todd Gurley really scares the crap out of me. If someone said to me, I'll give you Todd Gurley for Miles Sanders, I'm smashing the accept button. I'll take Todd Gurley and everything I've just said over Miles Sanders. That is how panicked I am, because with Miles Sanders, it's not just the fact that it's the fact he plays on a bad team that don't need to run the ball that often because they're always losing. It's the fact that Boston Scott still somehow gets touches, unknown to me how he does that. And he also takes receptions from him as well because he's pretty good with the ball. It's almost a running back by committee. Like, it's pretty. And then when it doesn't happen that way, um, so when it doesn't happen and then Sanders gets the majority of the carries or the majority of the snaps, like yesterday, he doesn't make the most of it. Um,
Mm.
it's just, I don't know. I just think at this stage, I'm all out. So just looking at yesterday, right? Miles Sanders had 60% of the snaps, and Boston Scott have 40% of the snaps. Oh wow. I just got some breaking news, which I'll share in a sec. And basically, with that 60% of snaps, Miles Sanders didn't do anything. Just didn't do anything at all. It's just not worth having in your team going forward. He's a costly liability with that schedule. So try and ship him and get out. I do have some breaking news.
Go for it.
Mark Ingram, who you probably shouldn't be worried about because I've just told you to drop him, but J.K. Dobbins as well have both tested positive for COVID and will miss Thursday night football.
Fire up the Gus bus.
Fire up the Gus bus.
Go out there and get that
So
Gus bus.
if you've listened to this, if you hit pause and dropped Gus Edwards, I said to you he's rosterable as a handcuff, but probably no more. Guess what? Handcuff season just happened, baby. He's just been elevated to the top of the depth chart. You can still cut Mark Ingram. He can go, but Gus bus, keep him another week.
Rush Nation, you heard it here first. My waiver claim for Gus Edwards will not be accepted.
No, I'm gonna put that in so you can't get it.
I'm going to finish this whilst Murf is smashing the accept button on any offer he gets from Miles Sanders. I am going to finish this off with a number 5 on Kenyon Drake. It is a split backfield now with Chase Edmonds. Had Drake not got into the end zone, his 12 fantasy points would have been 6 fantasy points. Edmonds would have gone from 10 to 16. Edmonds offers more in the passing game. I just don't trust Kenyon Drake anymore, and I'm not starting him anywhere.
That's fair. Their snap counts are about even. I think Drake is good enough to live on that snap count as a low end. No, but as a low end, we're talking about in fantasy football, right? Any other position, I would agree with you. Any other position, I would say, yep, I'm dropping Kenyon Drake, right? I get that. I think because he's still getting half the workload in a team that will be ahead a lot and will run the ball, I still think he's a running back, low end running back 2, but he's not the player that you bought.
Yeah, I think maybe that's my trouble.
I think he's not the player you bought. He's definitely a player who's not going to be as good as you would hope he would be. But as you said, 6 fantasy points without a touchdown before the end of the game in his first game back, where he wasn't even sure he was even going to play. He still got nearly half the snaps. If that continues, 10 points a game doesn't sound like a lot, but that's running back 2 territory right now. Is that sort of realm? I think he's a low end start. I think I'd start many others over him, but I think he is. Yeah, I get that. I think I guess I'm not as panicked as you. given that I still think he has a role, he is still starterable, but he's not the player that you bought. If he's your running back one, then you're panicked because you're like, I'm screwed.
Yeah.
But
Okay, so let's say you own Chase Edmonds as Kenyon Drake's backup, which you probably should have done.
yeah,
Handcuffed him. If you've got both, who are you going to play?
I'd start Edwards, but I wouldn't be surprised if you said to me that going between now and the end of the season, they finish within 5 to 7 points of each other. I'd go, yeah, okay, I buy that now. I think they're both as good as each other. I don't think either one. I think they're both hindered. I don't think Edmonds is going to massively outperform Drake, and I don't think Drake's going to massively outperform Edwards. I think they're relatively the same.
Yeah, I think Edmonds is going to finish. I think he's going to be finished. I'd say at least 12 points over Kenyon Drake at the end of the season. I've just got that feeling. And
But then you say that's still 11, 12, 13. It's still 6 games. So 2 points a game. That's what I mean. It's not a lot. Like, we're not talking about a huge differential between the two. If he finishes 12 points ahead, you go, okay, fine. I'd be like, yeah, I could see that. I could see Edmonds finishing 12 points ahead of Drake. I also think that's not a lot.
Maybe I should have gone with more. I think Edmonds finishes a lot more ahead of Drake. But
Yeah,
hey,
listen. I think look at the snap counts. I think this week it's a precarious situation because you could only go on the data, and the data says they're roughly a running back by committee 50-50 split.
yeah.
I'm more worried. The reason I'm slightly more bullish on Drake is because he was the one that was injured, and he was the one that wasn't really even sure that he was going to play, and he got 50% of the carries.
That's fair.
And that's why I'm a bit more bullish, because I'm thinking like, cool, if he was a nothing in this team, he'd have got a handful of snaps, a handful of carries. But you got only 50% of the workload. So that's where I'm a little bit more bullish.
I mean, the key to this is go out and get Gus Bus over both of these guys this week because he's going to get all the carries.
I mean, basically, Gus Bus equals Kenyon Drake plus Dalvin Cook. I'm joking.
You heard it here first, Rush Nation. Gus Bus is going off this week. Murf, we've got to the end of the show, mate. This was an absolute banger. Rush Nation, we appreciate you watching us. We appreciate you listening to us. Lockdown looks like it's going to end here in the UK, so happy days there. Head over to the website, check out all the articles at 5yardrush.co.uk. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. That would be much appreciated. If you would like full access to our rankings, head over to Patreon or the website where you can sign up to the Patreon. Murph's pointing his fingers if you can't see it.
So just on that, we're going to add a new tier to, we want to build a community channel. Okay, we've tried a few different mediums, but ultimately the one that we think works best is Slack. That's where we're going to answer questions every week. Questions for the show, ideas for the show. If you're active on there, we might even invite you on the show. So we're going to add a $1 a month Patreon tier where you get access to our Slack channel. That's like 60p, 70p a month. Come join it. Like, it's not live yet, but it will be. Come join it. Let's build a really cool community. Why are we charging for that? Purely maintenance. That's really it. It's just the maintenance of running it and making sure that we've got people who are always active on there. So, let's build a really cool community on there. Like I said, 70p a month. You're not really going to miss that, are you? Come join it. You can ask us some start sit questions on there. You can, that is where we're going to be active. So we're going to share a lot of that. Please share it around. Let's get hundreds of people signing up to that in a short period of time. And yeah, being there will be the place to be, the closest to the show, ask the most questions, exclusive giveaways, stuff like that.
This is where the fun happens, Rush Nation. It's been a longer one than normal, but hey, it's been a whole lot of fun. And the end of the fantasy football season is coming, so we want to get you to those ships. We want us to get those ships. We want all the ships in the 5-yard dock. Murph, this has been fun. You stay safe, big man. Rush Nation, as always, don't forget, keep rushing.